Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Unstressed Exec, where I talk about how to perform, lead, and live with clarity, calm, and confidence, even when life feels like it's coming apart at the seams. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, forensic psychologist, executive and resilience coach, and someone who's spent over 2 decades helping people navigate interpersonal conflict, personal disorders, and high-stakes human behavior. Before we dive in, just a quick note. If you're finding value in these episodes and want to go deeper, I urge you to check out my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer, From Conflict to Clarity, a no-nonsense guide to managing conflict in every relationship. It's packed with real-world strategies, over 75 reflection exercises, and neuroscience-backed tools to help you navigate conflict without losing your cool, whether it's at work, at home, or in moments of personal crisis. You can grab your copy now on Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the show notes. Now, today's episode is going to ruffle some feathers, and that's intentional. We're unpacking one of the most overused, often misunderstood, and emotionally charged terms in modern psychology. Drumroll, narcissism. This episode is titled Unraveling the Narcissist Next Door, How to Spot the Narcissist in Your Life and Manage Them Effectively. So to dive into this topic, there was a lot of directions I could have gone in, but where I knew I needed to start was kind of understanding the narcissism epidemic and breaking out myth versus reality. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. Everyone these days is a narcissist. We see it all over social media. We see it every time we have a drink with a friend or a colleague and they're complaining about their spouse or their dating partner or whatever. You scroll social media and the term gets thrown around casually. A friend who posts selfies, a partner who's emotionally distant, a boss who's assertive. But here's the truth. Most of those people aren't narcissists. According to the DSM-5, the American Psychiatric Association, its published diagnostic manual, think of it as the diagnostic Bible for the psychiatric and psychology community, Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or what I'll refer to as NPD going forward, it affects roughly 0.5%, so 0.5 to 1% of the general population. Maybe a bit higher in clinical or corporate settings or white-collar settings, but far less than social media would have you believe. True narcissism just isn't arrogance or confidence. It is a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, lack of empathy, all of these beginning in early adulthood and present across multiple contexts. So not just at work, but at work, at home, in friendships, across a range of social contexts. In other words, narcissism is, it's hard to say that 15 times. Narcissism is not about vanity. It's about fragile self-worth wrapped in armor. I love that description I came across. It's fragile self-worth wrapped in armor, and that armor is there to protect. Dr. Elsa Roningstam from Harvard Medical School describes narcissism as one of the best ways I've seen. She describes it as a spectrum of self-regulation with both adaptive and maladaptive forms. Healthy narcissism is self-confidence, the ability to take pride in achievement. When you think about even just getting out of bed in the morning and thinking, in a world of roughly 5 billion people, you have something to say, you have something to contribute, you have an opinion that matters, you need a little bit of narcissism, a little bit of healthy narcissism. For those of us that are on social media, for those of us that do podcasts, why the hell do I think that I have a voice and an opinion worthy of you listening right now? There's got to be a little healthy narcissism in there, a little bit of inflated, not even inflated, but self-confidence where I believe. And when I started out this podcast, I had 0 viewers, 0. So I didn't have self-confidence with the podcast. I had not demonstrated my value yet, right? Right now I've got, I don't know, 15,000 or so followers on Instagram. I've got about 1,500 followers on YouTube. Most of them, I think, probably gravitate towards my podcast on YouTube. But when I started out, I had nobody. I had no reason to believe that I should do a podcast. So it took a little narcissism, a little self-inflation for me to think I have something to say about these topics, and I think people will listen. And slowly and surely people are listening. And so thank you for you if you are listening. But it really has adaptive and maladaptive forms. And the problem, when we really talk about narcissism as a problem in our lives, we are really talking about the maladaptive sides of it. The other thing is we're throwing that term around a lot for people that have certain traits, but they don't have the pervasive pattern that shows what narcissism would be. So pathological narcissism as kind of a juxtaposition to healthy narcissism, by contrast, it depends on external validation for self-esteem. I need the world to constantly validate me. And no matter how much you fill up that validation cup, it's not enough. I need more. I need more. So as a result, for true narcissism, my sense of self, my self-worth, it's very brittle. It's very reactive. And often it can be very destructive. So that's the first thing to understand is the difference between kind of myth versus reality and how the term is often overused. So I want to pivot now to the overuse of the term and take a little bit of a deeper dive because I think this is important to set the tone. And to do this, I think we need to be honest. We're living in an age of diagnosis by TikTok and Instagram and social media. Everyone's an expert now. I actually am an expert. I am a clinical and forensic psychologist of over 20 years experience and also a trained executive and resilience coach. And I've got the receipts to back that up. You could check out my Stan store, check my link in the bio, go to LinkedIn and look me up. I'm also a chief clinical officer of a multinational and multi-million-dollar corporation. But everybody on social media has an opinion about narcissists. I am seeing coaches all the time, self-proclaimed coaches who have been in a narcissistic relationship and now they're experts. And many have good insights because they've walked through the fire. I get it. But they're missing the point on this one particular issue. And they tend to overgeneralize and over-pseudo-diagnose narcissism in their lives. And I want to urge you to be cautious of that. In reality, narcissism has really become a pop culture insult. Every ex is toxic. Every difficult boss is a narcissist. Every confident influencer is grandiose, right? The problem with overuse is twofold. One, it trivializes the real suffering caused by those with true NPD. It also blinds us to the nuance that narcissistic traits exist on a continuum. We all have them. I mentioned this earlier. The act of getting out of bed in the morning and thinking we have something to give to the world has a little bit of healthy narcissism in it. Dr. Craig Melkin, in his book, Rethinking Narcissism, this came out in 2015, he notes that a touch of narcissism is not only normal, it is essential for healthy self-esteem. The reverse we've seen as well. When you look at people with major depression, they actually perceive their self-worth and their actions in the world, actually, this is crazy, in a more realistic way than people that don't have depression. In other words, the depressive person tends to see reality and their sense of contribution and their role and their impact on the world, which relates to self-esteem, more accurately than the more healthy person that doesn't have it. Which means the healthy person carries around a little bit of armor, a little bit of narcissism that allows them to navigate through the day and deal with the normal ups and downs bullshit that we deal with every day. So we all need to feel special sometimes. The danger comes when that need becomes compulsive, manipulative, and exploitative. And that's what we see in the Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or NPD. So before labeling someone a narcissist, the key question is this. Is this a personality trait? Is this a temporary state or mode that they're in? Or is this a pervasive disorder or a pervasive pattern of behavior? That's the key that we have to start thinking through. And I think a lot of influencers, despite knowing quite a bit about narcissism, because they've been through it, some may even have it, they miss this critical distinction. So think about that as you navigate forward. So let's continue to take a deeper dive. We're going to get into some of the psychobabble here, but hopefully it's helpful. There is a personality triad of narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. I imagine many of you have heard of borderline personality. Histrionic is a similar type of disorder, and all three of these have significant overlap. If you were drawing a Venn diagram, they would all overlap pretty significantly. Not totally, but they would have an overlap. And it's important to understand the distinctions here. Narcissism doesn't exist in isolation. It often overlaps with other, what we call cluster B personality disorders in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's what we call the dramatic, emotional, and erratic cluster in the DSM-5. So let me first talk briefly. I'm not going into a super deep dive because you could find a lot of information on the internet. I would say, though, if you're going to find information about these disorders, get them from reputable sources or get them from trained clinicians. Because again, a lot of influencers and coaches out there may have good general intel. They don't have the depth of clinical background and training and experience. So first, let's talk about histrionic personality disorder, or HPD. This is a disorder, again, all of these are pervasive patterns of behavior across multiple contexts and across time. HPD, histrionic, involves attention seeking, exaggerated emotionality, and a craving to be seen, but usually without the cold entitlement of narcissism. So it is a drama queen, an attention queen or king, but it doesn't have that entitlement that narcissism brings to it, right? You might say early on when the Kardashians were blowing up, they kind of made a fit this, right? You kind of could maybe say Paris Hilton years ago when she was kind of popular. There are a number of other examples of people, and you could put on Lifetime television and you will see a multitude of miniseries or short miniseries that show somebody that has this intense desire to be seen, to be the center of attention and craving for that, but they don't have a sense of entitlement with it. So they're constantly pulling drama to their life and they're creating drama as a means to be the center of attention. That's your histrionic. Your borderline, their pathology, so BPD, borderline personality disorder, it centers around abandonment fears, unstable self-image, and emotional volatility. Borderlines often cling and then collapse, whereas narcissists inflate and attack. So the borderline clings and collapses. The borderline's pattern is, I love you, I love you, I love you. You hurt me, fuck off, or fuck you. Now I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Oh, now you repaired the relationship? Now I love you, I love you, I love you. Up, you betrayed me again in some minor way, you disappointed me. Now fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. It's back and forth. It's a slingshot. The quintessential example is Glenn Close's portrayal of the woman in Fatal Attraction with Michael Douglas. If you watch that movie, it's a bit dated, but go back and watch it if you're younger and you're not familiar with it. It's a very good movie. It shows a very deep entanglement with an illicit affair. And if you look at her sense of entitlement, that cling and collapse pattern, and the way that she inflates and then attacks when she feels about to be abandoned, that is a classic portrayal of borderline personality. And what happens is when borderlines feel they're about to be abandoned, they deal with it two ways. They preemptively push you away with a lot of anger, and at times it could be even violent, a lot of volatility emotionally, or they withdraw and they play the victim card. And this could include self-harm to seek attention, or self-harm to pull you back into being in the relationship or saving me. You'll see a scene in that movie that portrays that very well. So here's the thing with all of these disorders. These disorders sometimes coexist. You could have hybrid patterns of borderline narcissist or borderline histrionic or histrionic narcissist dynamics, right? The clinical distinction often comes down to empathy. And this is the key takeaway for this section of the podcast or this episode. It really comes down to empathy. Borderline individuals feel too much. They are often flooded with emotion. And then when emotion doesn't work in the way they want it to be, or the attachment to others, so they overattach or they cling on, then when they don't get that reciprocated, they feel shame, guilt, embarrassment, and then they react. The pendulum swings the other way, and then they react out of shame, anger, disgust, betrayal. Narcissists don't feel too much, okay? They feel too little. And then they use shame defensively. So they build armor around them so they don't feel shame. So they don't feel that they're being rejected. And then they gaslight others. So they're taking that and they're throwing it out at others. So that's where the gaslighting comes in. So you attacking me, you leaving me, I have armor on, it bounces off me, and now I'm going to throw it at you and use it back against you in a weaponized manner. Another way to think about this is the level of attachment, emotional attachment. Borderlines attach too much. They are over-attached. They have terrible boundaries. That's why it's called borderline, because there is a bad border between their sense of self and where the rest of the world is. And they mesh that, right? And they become over-attached. Narcissists are detached. Even if they seem charismatic and loving, early in the phase of a relationship, they might be love bombing. They're doing that as a way to manipulate. It's not true attachment. Your borderline truly feels a level of attachment. It's not healthy. It's overdone. The narcissist doesn't feel it. They're more cold and distant, but they can feign it or manipulate it when they need in order to get the attention and the admiration that they want. Okay. The key here is both are fragile, but one externalizes pain as aggression while the other internalizes it as despair. And it's the borderline that internalizes it. It's the narcissist that externalizes it. Okay? So let me talk about another thing that most of you hopefully don't have to deal with, but I'd be remiss, especially as a clinical and forensic psychologist, to not touch on this. And that is narcissism and psychopathy, or the psychopathic personality disorder. It's kind of the dark overlap between these two. And so we're going to move to the darker edge of this, where narcissism intersects with psychopathy. Dr. Robert Hare, who is probably one of the preeminent researchers in the world on psychopathy, he developed the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, or what's called the PCLR. He found that psychopathy and narcissism share traits, such as superficial charm, manipulativeness, and a general lack of empathy. But here's the difference. The narcissist still needs admiration. They are feeding off the energy that you're going to give them, and they need it like a constant feed of admiration, respect, desire. The psychopath doesn't need admiration. They don't give a shit. What they need is control. Now, sometimes the narcissist may need control in order to feel admired or to feel that they're keeping you and they're manipulating you into the relationship, but it's geared towards getting that admiration. Psychopath just wants control and manipulation. The narcissist ego injury fuels rage and retaliation. So when a narcissist feels that their ego is bruised or damaged or injured, they will often feel some rage or retaliation. I've got to push back. I've got to manipulate back. I've got to fight back. I've got to strike back in an emotional way, sometimes in a physical way. The psychopath's injury fuels strategy and predation. So they're much more predatory. They're much more reptilian-like, cold-blooded, calculating. In corporate or political settings, you'll often see a blend. It's what psychologist Paul Babiak calls the corporate psychopath. And this is in a book that Babiak and Hare wrote in 2006. These individuals in the corporate setting, they climb fast, they charm effortlessly, and they exploit strategically. That's what they do. You could often say as well that US presidents or any leaders of any world country probably have a strong dose of narcissism just to survive in that environment, and some actually have a dose of psychopathy. I'm not going to name names at this moment, I do go on live on TikTok and occasionally Facebook and Instagram, usually on TikTok. So maybe look for one of those lives, and I'm happy to get into more detail on that question. The overlap between narcissism and psychopathy forms what Del Paulis and Kevin Williams, in their book from 2002, they termed it the dark triad: narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. In plain English, it's charm, coldness, and cunning, all in one package. And what's interesting, I'm not going to go way down the rabbit hole with psychopathy, but you will find that the more intelligent psychopaths, because there's very smart ones and there's ones that aren't so bright, they tend to lean on the bright side often. They will actually work at manipulating emotional empathy even though they don't feel it. So they will do things like take acting classes. It's long been shared that the Menendez brothers, who I believe both were quite psychopathic, they did have a horrible upbringing, no doubt. There's good evidence for that. But they still were quite psychopathic. They were reading books on psychopathy and books on narcissism and emotional expression while waiting trial. They were studying up on how to play the role in court. They also were taking some acting type lessons in different ways that they were able to get access to. All of those are examples of that kind of cunning that the psychopath could bring to the table, right? Think of Ted Bundy, the infamous serial killer. Was very charismatic, very convincing. He was the best friend of the mayor, or very close friend, I should say, of the mayor in Seattle at the time, prior to his life unraveling and then going on the run and then committing more and more disorganized crimes that led to his eventual being caught and downfall. So again, charm, coldness, and cunning. So you're probably wondering, George, this is great. This is good background, but what do I do with this? How do I use this in my life and in my relationships? So we're going to pivot now to talk about how do you spot narcissism in your relationships. So how do you do it? How do you spot it? Not on TikTok, not on Instagram, but in real life. So I've got 5 things that I would suggest you look for. And remember, you're looking for these over time and context. It can't be just one incident or just a few incidents or even just at work. When somebody brings one of these personality disorders into your life, think of it like an apple. There's certain types of disorders like anxiety or depression where the edge of the apple or even into the apple from the outside in, it's starting to rot or it's damaged. Think of it like that. When you're talking about a personality disorder, the core is damaged. And if the core is damaged, no matter what context that person goes into, it's bringing that core sense of self into that context. So you should see patterns across multiple contexts and across time. So the 5 things to look for. First, grandiosity with fragility. So they crave praise. They bolster they're puffing their chest. If they were a peacock, they're constantly spreading their pretty plumage for all to see. So they crave praise, but they can't handle criticism. The moment you challenge them, they rage, they retreat, they retaliate, or they gaslight back against you. So grandiosity with fragility. The second is transactional empathy. What do we mean here? They appear empathic when it benefits them, but it vanishes when it costs them. So their empathy is tied to what's in it for me, and it could look super empathic, totally. Because often, especially if they're more intelligent, they are bright enough to pick up on social cues. They have to. That's how they have to learn to manipulate. So they're pretty good at picking up on this. They might even study up on it, as I mentioned earlier. But it's not based on true empathy. It's based on what's in it for me. And as soon as that advantage no longer benefits them, the empathy goes away. Third, they control through chaos. Narcissists love to destabilize others in order to maintain emotional dominance. They may alternate between charm and cruelty, keeping you guessing in order to keep you hooked, right? There's a push-pull, right? This is the person that doesn't fully engage until you're really ready to walk out the door, and then they re-engage, and then they love bomb, and then they back away. So they're controlling through inconsistency, chaos, and intermittent reinforcement. Fourth, they are obsessed with image. They curate reality, relationships, careers, even their sense of morality. Religiosity is another way they can mask it in order to reinforce their own superiority, in order to reinforce how well they are. So social media is wonderful for the narcissist because they can constantly put their highlight reel or even a fake highlight reel out to the world while living a very insecure, very low self-esteem kind of shit show behind the scenes that they don't want anyone to see. In many ways, they're like the Wizard of Oz, hiding behind the curtain with all this fanfare. But when you pull the curtain back, they crumble or they react in ways that, rage, retreat, retaliate. Fifth, there's a lack of true accountability. And this is one that you will see over time. Apologies are performative. They will say the words, but their words and their actions are not aligned. Their words and their behaviors are not aligned. And so they never quite repair the relationship. Or they'll say things like, I'm sorry you feel that way. And that's not accountability. Instead of saying, I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry that I did this thing that caused you pain. That's a little more accountable. It's manipulation disguised as remorse. So that's the fifth. So the next question is, how do you manage narcissism in relationships? I'm going to break it down across a few different domains. So first, you can't out-love or out-logic or out-argue a narcissist. It can't be done. But you can manage them if you understand the rules of engagement. Let's break it down by each context. First, the family. With a narcissist or with a narcissistic parent or sibling, the goal isn't reconciliation. The goal needs to be regulation. How do you regulate and manage it? You should lower emotional expectations, flat out, full stop. Limit the topics that trigger gaslighting or guilt. You have a choice to walk away. You have a choice to not engage. Make that choice. Use what I call strategic empathy, which means validating without enabling. I'll give you an example of that. I can see this is important to you instead of defending your boundaries, right? So instead of saying this isn't important or why do you feel that way, you could still say, I can see this is important to you. You're validating why it's important to them without acknowledging that you're taking on that same level of value. Boundaries become the antidote with family, not hostility. You're really looking for clarity and you're looking for regulation and you're looking for peace. So very much you need to pick your battles. And what's tough with family is we could go cold on family. Some people have done that, go no contact, but that's hard to do for many of us. And many of us, we don't want to do that. So it really becomes regulating and managing. Let's talk about friendships. In friendships, narcissists tend to dominate airtime and emotional bandwidth. That's what they're doing in the relationship, right? You'll know you're in one when you leave the interaction and you're drained instead of nourished, especially if you're bringing an issue to them that you're struggling with and you walk away an hour later and you're like, God, I feel drained. I don't feel that my cup was filled. I feel like it was drained. You might be in the presence of a narcissist. To manage that, don't compete for empathy. They won't give it. They just won't. And so you have to make a judgment at some point of what are you willing to tolerate there. Keep interactions light or shared activity based, not emotionally intimate. This is not the person that you want to drop all your emotional baggage on, expecting a deep, empathetic return. You're not going to get it. Right? So don't throw your emotional pearls before swine. You're not going to get it. If the friendship consistently costs more than it gives, give yourself permission to pull away. Your peace requires it. Your sense of boundaries require it. You could still they could be a drinking buddy. They can be a buddy you go biking with. They could be a friend you do certain activities with. They're just not the friend that you're going to kind of share intimate secrets with or seek emotional validation from. Let's pivot to the workplace. Lord knows we've all seen this. Narcissistic colleagues or bosses, they tend to thrive on hierarchy and praise. They often reward loyalty and they punish autonomy or they punish disagreement. The key to this is manage upward. What do I mean by manage upward? Mirror professionalism, not emotion. Don't get pulled into emotionality and don't allow yourself to be triggered. Mirror objective professionalism. Document your interactions with them. If you are starting to have dynamics that you feel like they are gaslighting or they're engaging in narcissistic retaliation or defensiveness, document those interactions so you have a paper trail. Because there is a chance downstream that they can try to use and gaslight you in a way that puts you in a bad light within the organization and maybe even leading to termination. Set clear deliverables and boundaries to avoid moving goalposts. Narcissists will constantly change the narrative. They will constantly change the goalpost. You give them what they asked for, and they say, well, that's not what I intended. That's not what I meant. That's not what I wanted. So it's very clear to set clear deliverables and clear expectations. And then praise them, but do it strategically. They respond to admiration, but can't process critique. So when you're giving critique or you're giving feedback, you have to be very cautious about doing it in a way that doesn't raise their defensiveness, which they then can use, if they're a boss, they could use in a position of power, okay? You have to be cautious there, right? It is kind of a game there. It really is. It's kind of a chess match. Above all, protect your reputation. Narcissistic leaders will often weaponize perception to their benefit and to the detriment of others that are in their orbit or others that are critiquing them, or they feel a perceived threat. So that's the workplace. What about intimate relationships? Serious dating, engagements, marriages, and so on. Narcissistic partners are often intoxicating at first. They're charismatic. They're intense. They love bomb. They're magnetic. They're engaging, right? But here's the thing. Dr. Ramani Durvasula says in their book, Should I Stay or Should I Go? The love bombing phase gives way to devaluation and discard. So in other words, it's love bombing, and then there's a flip. Once they feel they've got you, the love bombing was only to pull you in and hook you to them. Once that hook is complete and they feel they've got you wrapped in the love bombing and the manipulation, then they devalue and then they discard. And that discard could be up and down. There's marriages that this pattern has gone on for years. Doesn't mean they run away, but they devalue, they dehumanize, they gaslight. You will feel invincible. You will also feel confused or constantly walking on eggshells. And you'll also feel invisible on the flip side at times. During the love bombing, you feel invincible. It's a wonderful feeling. But then when the flip happens, comes the feeling of confusion, you're invisible, and you're walking on eggshells around them, not sure what's going to set them off. The cycle repeats. Idealize, devalue, discard, hoover. Hoover is the comeback. It's the sucking you back, right? And then again, idealize you, start to devalue, start to push you away, and then they suck you back in. They hoover you back in. The only way to stop the cycle is you have to opt out of the game. You have to stop playing into that dynamic. You have to be aware of the pattern and stop playing into it. And here's the thing. No amount of empathy will heal someone whose entire defense system depends on avoiding shame. That's critical. You can't love them out of this. You can't empathize them out of this. You just can't. And most therapists are not going to say this to you, but they need to, right? You can't wish them out of it. You can't heal them out of it if they're not willing to make the changes. So these are some tough things in relationships. So I'm going to pivot for a moment because some of you might be asking, what if I'm the narcissist? Then what? So I'm going to turn the mirror around. What if you're realizing that you might carry some of these traits? First, don't panic. Okay? Narcissism exists on a continuum, and awareness is the first step toward health. So what I would encourage, one, don't self-diagnose yourself. Get connected with a therapist or get connected with a clinically informed or clinically trained coach. That's what I bring in my coaching. I do some therapy, but I don't do a lot of therapy anymore. Mostly what I do is executive and resilience coaching, but it's clinically informed because I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist of 20 years. So ask yourself these questions. Do I crave admiration more than connection? Second, do I dismiss feedback reflexively? Like, is it my default mechanism where I dismiss feedback, certainly any critical feedback? Third, do I feel contempt for those that are vulnerable or soft or going through a moment of weakness, not only in myself, but in others. Do I feel contempt? Contempt is a very specific word. Narcissists often feel a sense of contempt for those that are showing weakness or vulnerability. Why? One reason, it's the lack of empathy. But two is they recognize at a deep level that they also have vulnerability and they also have weaknesses, but they are so against acknowledging that. Their armor is so strong that they have to then project that out to the world. I'm not a problem. You're the frickin' problem. I'm not weak. You're frickin' weak. That's their kind of mentality, right? So if any of these are a yes, and certainly if 2 or 3 of these are a yes, it doesn't make you a monster. It means your self-worth might be externally sourced. So you could work on these 3 things. And again, I recommend you do so with a professional, a therapist or a trained, like a clinically trained or clinically informed coach. But number 1, start adopting radical accountability. Learn to say, I was wrong, or my bad, or that was me and I'll do better. It disarms shame and it builds empathy. The other thing is, as you learn to say this over time, it makes you realize that feeling a bit of shame and remorse and self-doubt, you'll survive that. You won't be annihilated. You won't burn up into like a flame of dust and ash. You could survive being accountable. It's important to flex that muscle and prove to yourself that you'll be okay. Second, empathy training. And there's some controversy about this, but I'm still a fan of this for people that are showing narcissistic traits or fairly low on the continuum. If you're looking at a very severe narcissist, maybe less effective, but it's worth mentioning. Empathy training. Practice perspective taking. Actually imagine how your words land on others from their perspective. Narcissists go through life and they often have early childhood experiences where they're just not either taught that or they just don't have the luxury of taking time to think about how others process. So you have to retrain yourself on how to do that. Third, I've already said it, therapy or coaching. Evidence shows that with insight-oriented therapy, individuals with narcissistic traits can grow genuine empathy and humility. Now, as they get more severe, it gets a little tougher. But again, you don't know where you fall on that. So pursue those professional services if you're concerned. Remember, the goal isn't to erase your ego. It's to ground it in authenticity, not performance. So it's to ground it in a true, comfortable sense of who you are with all of your gifts and strengths and all of your weaknesses. Okay, that's the key. So let me give you some final thoughts. Narcissism is not just a diagnosis, it's a defense. Beneath the bravado often lies deep insecurity, shame, or emotional neglect. Understanding narcissism doesn't excuse harm. This is critical, but it does empower you to disengage from it strategically as opposed to emotionally. And whether you're managing a narcissist, healing from one, or recognizing the traits in yourself, the path forward is the same. You're looking for clarity, you're looking for boundaries, and you're looking for the ability for self-reflection. Remember, conflict doesn't destroy you, confusion does. And the other thing that destroys is conflict without repair. And narcissists struggle with that repair piece. So it's something to think about whether you're working with one, in a relationship with one, or you're looking in the mirror and you're wondering, damn, am I the problem? Know what you're dealing with and lead with both strength and sanity. That's the key here, right? Awareness and then having a map forward. And today I gave you a bunch of things to start with. If today's conversation hit home and you're ready to take the next step from insight to action, I highly recommend go check out my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer, From Conflict to Clarity, a no-nonsense guide to managing relationships throughout your life. This isn't fluff. It is practical. It's a no bullshit guide designed to help you break the cycles of reactivity, build emotional strength, and navigate conflict with more confidence and less chaos. You will get hands-on exercises, over 75 of them, powerful frameworks, and different mindset shifts that I use every day with clients in my coaching practice, from high-achieving executives to people that are just trying to hold their personal lives together. It's available now on Amazon, and I'll drop a link in the show notes. As always, thank you for being here, for doing the work, and for choosing to be the calm in the storm. Now, finally, a quick call to action. Insight without action changes nothing. If you're ready to turn awareness into movement and stress into strategy, coaching can be the catalyst. Coaching will change you. Reach out to set up a free consultation. You can find me at www.theunstressedexec.com or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube as The Unstressed Exec. Let's create real momentum starting now. Until next time, I'm Dr. George Vergolias, The Unstressed Exec. Thanks for listening. See you soon. And remember, shift happens.